Here we are again, the fifth session, the fifth free workshop that we've been recording this week. And today's guest is Carol, who is a deputy head. And she's also an education coach, and she can tell you a lot more about what she does once she starts talking to you guys. We've got a couple of other teachers who are joining in with this call, so we've got some conversation points. And just to kind of recap, really, for all you guys who have hopefully found this helpful this week and watching these recordings back. On Monday, if you're basically a quick recap, if you're just tuning into this one or you're just watching this one, I'll tell you about the things that have come before so you can check them out to see if they'll be helpful too. So on Monday, I talked about video and how to set up your video and how to make your video look as good as possible so you can command attention in the class. And on Tuesday, we had Matt Matheson, who is a speaking coach and an online facilitation coach, and he told us about some tips to get prepared and use tools whilst you're doing your sessions. And the Wednesday we had Spencer, who used to be a teacher and is now an online facilitation master, and he talked us through some really great tools, some digital tools that you can use to get more engagement. And then yesterday we had Jim Raleigh, who's a learning designer and education consultant for adults in brands and companies, and we had a really great discussion around sort of more of the human elements to it all, really. And he had some really great tips around stuff that wasn't to do with the screens at all, and about trying to get people off the screens and using different things to help with the engagement rather than just having everyone staring through the screens the whole time. So check those out if you haven't seen them before. So this whole thing really just came about when I'd had a chat with my brothers and some teacher friends, and they were just saying, look, you teachers have been kind of thrust into the position of, like, some of you have got put on online lessons now, and you might have never have done it before. And it is a different experience, and it's a different way that using different tools and techniques that you would use normally in the classroom, or trying to take what you would normally use in the classroom and translate it into this digital world, which can be really difficult at first. So the idea was just to bring in a few people who could share some tips and tricks to help you guys with that and to answer your questions too. So hopefully we can do that again this evening. Today, well, it's 4 o'clock, so I guess we're nearly this evening. So I'm going to hand over to Carol, and then we'll have some questions and stuff in a bit. Okay. Carol, I'm just going to make you host so that you can share your screen if you would like to.
Yes, please. I will do.
And over to you, Carol.
Okay, so obviously as a teacher, I've got a PowerPoint, goes without saying. So let's just see. Can everybody see it?
Sure. Carol, could I just ask, just before we start and get into your tips, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself? Just a quick snapshot, because I didn't do a great job of introing you.
That's all right. So I am a deputy head teacher, but my primary thing is I'm an English teacher. I'm a secondary English teacher. I've been teaching for 20 odd years. We'll leave it at that. And I suppose I'm going to offer a dual perspective, because I'm also a mum to a girl who's in year 7. My daughter's in year 7. So we've gone from being year 6 was quite hellish, I can't lie, in the summer. And now we're in year 7 and on live lessons. And that has been fascinating to see. So I feel that I can offer a personal view of how it's going, but also what I'm seeing on the other side of it. So a few tips from that point of view. So shall I get straight on? Might as well. Let's go for it.
Yep, that's great. So, thank you.
I would say I couldn't really distill it down, so I've ended up with 5 slides. I think the key one is to be ready at the start. There's nothing worse than having the kids all waiting in the waiting room and they're waiting for the teacher to come in. So it's that about being ready and being visible, as we're all demonstrating tonight, with your camera at head height. Whilst it's been really amusing to see some people's torsos and teachers popping in from the side, it is important, if you want to make a good start, to be there and ready. A good one I've seen and I've tried myself is to have music playing at the start of lessons. It just sort of calms things and cuts out the background noise a little bit. Huge fan of Take That personally, and wham on a good day. And something as well not particularly modern or relevant can engage the kids, because at least it allows them to say, what is that garbage, miss? What on earth are you doing? Why? Please stop that noise and teach. So it's another way of being ready and being engaging. Having something for the kids to do during the register. Now, I know schools are doing it lots of different ways, and you can get registers, or there are teachers who are calling out names, but just having something to do, whether you can see, I've sort of screenshotted a slide of mine, whether it's just telling them what equipment they need and to get ready, getting them to write the date and title, or even a more engaging one, which I've got on a different slide. And then taking the register, maybe in an interesting way. If you've taught them already that week, bringing them back and saying, okay, before I take the register, yesterday we did poetry, so you need to tell me one thing you can remember instead of answering your name. And it just moves them on and picks up the pace a little bit. A key one for me is teach the kids how to pin you. Because what I've found from my daughter's point of view is that she's got the full gallery in front of her. She can see all her friends who are, messing about, checking out. There are dogs running behind. There are parents walking past, all those things. And so it's quite distracting. So teaching the kids how to pin you so they can only look at you during the lesson is a helpful tip, I think. Then it's behaviour. Set the rules. Remind them every lesson, if it's really necessary. Different teachers, particularly at secondary, will have different ways of running these lessons. So you need to set your own rules and remind them of what you're expecting. And that might be cameras on, microphones off. It probably is no mobile phones. And whilst you can't physically confiscate or enforce, it's something that you can just make clear. It's about, your levels of standards of behaviour in the classroom that you would expect. And maybe put that on a slide, or just remind them, just so that they're all clear. Some teachers are saying, yes, you can turn your camera off once we've started. Others want it on. And that's entirely your preference, but make sure the kids know what your preference is. Speak slowly. This is rich coming from me. I naturally speak quite quickly. But there are glitches. Some people's internet is better or worse than others. I've had a few instances of being frozen on the screen, and it's never when I'm in an attractive pose, and then never. And it's the same with the children. So just be aware of the fact that everything is going to go more slowly than it might do in a lesson. There's not going to be that bang, bang, bang of questioning, because sometimes we're playing catch up. And forgive yourself for it. That's how it is. You will probably do half as much as you're expecting to do every lesson, and that's okay, because you're still getting on and the kids will still be learning and progressing. Turn off the notifications in the chat box. You're in charge of that, teachers. Press do not disturb. 2 reasons. 1, because you'll get a notification every time somebody writes something, and that really does impact on people reading anything and you reading anything. But also it affects the kids as well. So if you turn it to do not disturb in the notifications at the top, then that will mean that everything is clear all the time. And I would say it's actually the perfect opportunity for teaching children how to communicate. Often you find that kids revert to playground language, oi, can I borrow a pen? Oi, what have you got for that? Whereas in this situation, which is unfamiliar, they've got to start to use names. So they've got to start to say, Kim, could you just please do something? Penny, do you mind? And so it's a nice way of talking to them and talking about how you engage with people, looking at them, saying, I know you can't see me, I don't know, but make eye contact with me. Please look at the screen when I'm talking to you. Because when we're in situations, when we're in meetings in the future, when we're in interviews, these sorts of skills are softer skills, but they are important skills. So I actually think it's quite precious time. And it's nice to see the faces, I'll be honest. Practical tips. Oh, please make it easy for children and parents. Limit printing. And if they've got to print it, please try and put it onto one document. I cannot tell you how much printing I've done. We're a ream of paper in, we've bought new printer cartridges, and it's brilliant work and it's brilliant resources.
I did hear of a family who, the partner teacher that I work with sometimes, she discovered that they didn't have a printer.
No.
And mum had been writing it all out by hand.
Yes.
And then the child was doing it. So they've now agreed that school are printing it. And
yeah, I mean, in the first lockdown, we printed everything and we had people picking it up from school and we delivered it home. And I think that's something that we also have to remember, that whilst laptops might have been provided, printers haven't. So, you know, it is important that you limit what you're asking them to get in front of them. And if they do have to, name it appropriately. The number of images I've had through, I get JPEGs, I get PDFs, I get Word documents that have strange names, which makes it quite difficult to then save, work it out, find it again, if it doesn't have the subject line in the title, or if it doesn't say what it is. So they're just little tips. Or number the pages. If you're printing off a document, please number the pages, because that will make it far easier for you. And I found that when I've been doing it. The kids are like, what page is it? Where do I need to be? But if you've numbered the page, you can at least go to, you know, page 3, top of, page 6, and it just makes it a little bit easier. Like you say, Penny, use OneDrive. Lots of schools have lots of different systems. We've got class charts. So sometimes, you know, we'll be on Teams presenting, we'll get the lessons on Teams, but then we'll have sent the documents that they require in class charts, and we're all slowly moving over to OneDrive, because then we can flash it up on the screen. It takes a bit of setting up, I can't lie. I wouldn't class myself as the most technologically able, but I'm certainly getting there now. But it's worthwhile. Effectively, you put everything you have into the OneDrive, and then you'll be able to pull it down. Read to them. Don't think you have to spend the whole lesson, you know, all jazz hands and telling them information. Read them the stories, read them the extracts, read them something interesting that you've found. One of my daughter's loveliest lessons last week was just that. The teacher said, right, settle down. He didn't use the phrase Jackanory, I did, but that shows my age. And he read to them. And that was lovely, you know, to see, you know, just sitting there staring at him as he read. And don't be afraid to set tasks, extended writing. You know, just because I think there's a danger, and we're all the same, because we see technology as being quick and active and constant. But in a classroom, you know, we would have some extended writing. There will be some tasks. You know, you might say to them, right, it's time to write now. You've got 8 minutes to write the exam answer. Get on. And you stay watching them. And then that allows them to use the hands up or whatever setup, which is where I'm coming to engagement. I think engagement is difficult because you do spend all your time and you can't see them as much. But I would say use the chat box in a really pre-planned way. So things like making sure they've got the chat box up at the start and saying things like, right, okay, so here's 5 words on the board. 1 is happy, 2 is bored, 3 is nervous, 4 is scared, 5 is hungry. Write down in the chat box the number that relates to how you're feeling today. And it just gets the kids engaging. They have to get involved. They have to write something down. And I think it's easy to forget and get kids to keep using talking and answering questions and picking on them. But there are children who won't want to engage and won't want to speak in front of their peers. And the chat box is a really nice way for your quieter children to continually get involved. So answering it and also saying to them, okay, I want you to all write your answer. Don't press enter. Everybody just write your answer, and then you can say, okay, first person I want to answer is Jimmy. And he will show his answer first. So he gets in first. So you can, as a teacher, you know your own children, you're able to get the ones who are less likely to contributing first, but everybody has to be ready. And I think that's been a good way. And then I recently found @forms. I read this on a blog, that if you go into your chat and you type @forms, it brings up the poll. So you can instantly write a poll and get them to vote. And it's really easy to do just in the chat box. So, you know, who is the most to blame for the death of King Duncan? And they just get to vote. And then it's a quick way of using it for engagement as well, which I thought was fun. Same with mini tests, any form of mini test, whether you've printed it out, whether you upload something that you've pre-prepared, a little test, or use Quizlet. There's plenty of things on there, or Kahoot, all those kinds of things, all can be used just to keep them engaged. And as I've sort of alluded to, use the hands up function, but don't limit yourself to it, because I can hear when I'm listening to my daughter, I can hear, did you have a question? No, miss, I just left it up from earlier. Or they put their hands up and say, please, can I go to the toilet? And the teacher says, yes, you can go to the toilet. Put your hand down. So whilst it's a useful function to have, I also think it's almost should be once you're in silent extended writing, use the hands up just for that, just for I need help. Because otherwise it's a constant, right, everybody put their hands down, only put your hand up if you want something, and you can miss it. You know, you as a teacher, you've got so much going on the screen. You're trying to monitor what everybody's doing. It's much more difficult than being in person. So it can be quite tricky. So think about your use of hands up. And then finally, wellbeing. And it's yours, teachers, as well as students. I think remember to chat. Some of these kids are seeing nobody. My daughter's an only child. I'm working in one room. My husband's working in another. She wants to talk. She's like a coiled spring. So when the teacher joins and starts with, so somebody tell me something. What have you done today? Anybody been out? Anybody on a walk? Remember that, you know, just because you're live and maybe you're even being recorded doesn't mean you can't have the normal conversations that you would naturally have when they've come in from break or when you've seen them on the first lesson after the weekend. So remember who you are. As teachers, stay true to yourself and your personalities. You show me if you want to rest or a bit of fun. Say to them, you know, right, go back through your books. We've now been live for a couple of weeks now or however long. I want you to find, you've got 2 minutes to find the best thing you've done in our lesson so far. And I want you to get it open and then you're going to hold it up to the camera, show me it and let me have a good look. And that allows you to assess some progress. But it also gives them a chance to show off because it's very distant. And whilst people are sending in photographs, they're not getting that same immediate praise that they're used to getting when you wander around the classrooms and mark the books and talk to them and praise them. Again, with the tell me about the best time you've had so far in lockdown, tell me about the worst, all of those things. Hands up, thumbs up. So getting them to wave and throw their hands up and anything just to keep them. You know, putting your hand up to say you want silence. Some people do that in the classrooms anyway. Why should it be any different? You know, you just do that and all of a sudden they'll be like, what? Why's Miss got her hand up? Miss, do you want something? No, I just want you all to look at me. And I want you to do the same. So it just, again, it's another form of simple engagement. Remember, you've got private message. So there might be a case for using the private message. You know, you don't always have to chat to everybody. If the child looks a bit miserable or has a confused expression on their face or has the head down and you can't really see the head, it's the quiet word. In a classroom, we'd go and have the quiet word. Here, we'll have to use the private message to do it, but it's worth thinking about. And finally, you'll be pleased to know, who's supporting you? You know, it's a tough time for all of us. In the first lockdown, I ran a staff wellbeing group, which was Carol's tea and biscuits. And the joke was that I always turned up with a tub of biscuits and I held them up and said, would anybody like one? Of course, nobody can, but they got used to it. But we all had a brew and we just chatted about nothing mindlessly. We did it at break time because in real life, there would be break. And whilst, you know, it's not as relaxed as it used to be, we'll all be on duty, there is that chance for keep in touch with your teacher friends. Keep in touch with all of your friends. Use the day effectively. You are entitled to your lunch. You are entitled to a break. Get a coffee, ring a friend, go for a walk. Because it's hard. So everybody's well-being matters. So make sure you look after yourselves. That's it. There's my top tips.
Thanks, Carol. They were really good and really, really practical. And it's great to have some tips from, from someone who's got the sort of very relevant, very relevant experience. And there's some things in there that were great that I'd like to just ask you a little bit more about, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I love the one about having music at the start of the lessons, and that's actually something that I learned in real life workshops when I do workshops for companies and stuff, and it works online too. Rather than just having that awkward silence,
Yes.
having something going on, just something, waiting. And as you say, that can then engage that chat that you're talking about, or you could chat about the tunes or whatever.
Yeah.
Carol, I'm just going to ask you to stop sharing your screen, so it's just us chatting, if that's cool, and then it'll be a little bit better for the recording there, I think. But we can always go back to them slides if we feel like you need to. But one thing that I thought was great, and then the other thing that I noted was around printing. Like, I think that's a really good tip for people.
Sorry, I think you've taken me off that I can't.
Okay, cool.
Oh, there we are.
There we go.
There we are.
Yeah, so I was thinking about printing, because I don't have a printer. There's lots of people who don't even have a printer at home, right? It's kind of one of those things that you might have used to have, but you haven't got anymore.
Yes.
So for teachers who are finding that as a problem, in terms of they need kids to have some sort of paperwork, are there any other workarounds that you can suggest that might help them if teachers can't print?
I think it's about what you're trying to deliver. The beauty of technology now is there's so much available. So, a lot of texts, I'm speaking from an English point of view, but a lot of the texts are available online, so children can get access to them. So you can, and then you can screenshot it and put it onto your own slides, so they've got them. A lot of people, and certainly some of my daughter's teachers, are sharing the PowerPoints with them. So once they've taught the lesson, it's still available. And all they've done is embed the resources they need. It's a difficult one because you're so used to, in a school, having the resources. I can't wait. My daughter's about to start Midsummer Night's Dream. How she's going to do it without a copy of the text is going to be impressive. Now, I've got one, but that's because I'm an English teacher. I've got a copy of the text, but I'm pretty sure it's not the kind of thing that's lying around most households. But you can go online and you can find these things online. I think that's where there's almost the beauty, because you're having to take yourself away from being limited to resources. People are having to think outside the box, so they're having more discussions, or they're using much shorter extracts from literature or textbooks and using them. And I think it's interesting that textbooks are coming back. I've always been quite a fan of a textbook. I like books, but it's certainly proved useful. I know that the math staff and the science staff have made sure that the kids all have science and maths textbooks at home. So they're able to say, can you just turn to page 23 in your books? And all the kids have them. And I know a lot of schools have done a lot of work getting books out to kids, or having opportunities for children to collect what they need. And I think that's important. But it's a difficult one. It very much does come down to screen sharing and showing extracts and reading it together, but not the poor mum who's writing everything out.
No, that's a big task.
She needs sainting.
No, that's great. And so there's another thing, and this question's come up by a few people actually, and I put on the form when people signed up for this, one of the questions, what question would you ask? And it come up a few times this week about trying to find that balance between the more extroverted children and the ones who are introverted, and trying to give them this, because obviously in a classroom you'd be able to go around and pay them the attention. So I was wondering, like, if you could expand a little bit more on that, and what other techniques have you used to sort of try to make those introverted children feel a bit more involved or feel a bit more comfortable?
So I think going back to what I said about the engagement in the chat box, what I've found is extrovert children want to talk. So they're the ones who, you ask a question, they go, and they're straight away. Whereas the introverted ones are sitting there, or they've started to go like this and put their heads down, because they're looking for anywhere to look at in case you pick on them. Because I'm a big cold caller. I'm not really a hands up person. I just say your name and I expect you to answer. But that's where the use of the chat box to say, right, I want everybody to write your answer in there. That's useful. The other thing that I've experimented with some success, but it'll get there, is breakout rooms. And then you can put children into breakout rooms, and you would group just like you would do in a classroom. You can choose who goes in there. So you can put your very quiet ones together, or you could put, one noisy one in there with the quiet ones, but give specific instructions to the noisy one that you're the chair and you've got to get all the answers out and somebody else is going to share. But I actually think in some ways, teachers will be picking up a lot from this in terms of how, I'm going to call them the invisible children. They're never invisible because you know they exist and you're dealing with them. But the ones who really want to hide in classrooms, this has almost given them a voice because they like the virtual world. They feel happier in the virtual world. And sometimes they are the children who do want to turn the cameras off as well. And you can say, and that's up to you as a teacher, you say, right, okay, I've seen all your faces. Everybody give me a big smile. And once you've done that, go on, you can turn your camera off. But when I say turn it back on. And then it's instant. They all go off because they don't want you to see them. But then that's allowed you to private message and set a task and have those little chats. Because remember, on the chat, you could write, hey up, Kim, everything okay? Privately. And you could put, yes, miss, I'm fine. All's good. So I actually think there are lots of benefits. I want to be back I can't lie, I want to be back in a classroom, but
of course,
but it's not horrible. And sometimes, the very logistics of it, the practicalities, seeing everybody in this very small space is a lot easier than going like that around quite an enormous room sometimes. So there's certainly that element, particularly as I said at the beginning about if you have the rules that you've got to be able to see them, it allows them to be seen. I can just see a question.
So we'll get to that, and we'll get to the question. Thanks, Nicola. We'll get to your question in a minute. I've just got one more bit to dig in on those tips, if you don't mind, before we jump to Nicola and Penny's questions. I love the fact that you had, a point in there about well-being. Because I think with all of this, obviously we're talking about like practical things, practical tips, teaching, all of that. But school is such a big part of the well-being and the social interactions and the general general life of kids, and not having that is a big impact. And I know it's, for the people I know, it's having quite a big impact on the kids, which is really not nice to see. And I love, you talked about just have those chats and don't feel pressured for it all to be, we have to learn all of this and all of that. It's actually, I think that's one thing that, especially coming from a deputy head, someone who's, going to be telling your teachers, I'm sure, the same sort of things.
Yeah.
To remember to just have that social element in there too, and try to make it a bit, normalize it a little bit,
You've got
so
to.
And I think I was just going to ask you on that, like, are there any other things that that go beyond the classroom or the virtual classroom that you've been suggesting or telling, or you found that has worked for other students in terms of just general well-being?
So
in this situation,
depending on the school that you're in, where I come from a school where we're very lucky. We have year managers who are communicating, sending out PowerPoints, sending out little videos. My own daughter has received stuff like this on worry, little 2-minute YouTube clips to watch that say, this is a worrying time. There's a lot out there. The Action for Happiness is a great thing. They do the monthly charts of do one, and they tell you what to do every day. I think they're quite useful. And I think it's just important to remind the kids to communicate. I've seen the chat function used nicely at the end, where the teacher said, right, okay, now you can chat. So in your chat function, you can either chat or you can write messages to each other, and then they instantly start sending drivel that nobody else understands. And then, or you say to them, right, and check in on them. There's lots of challenges we set, and we did in the first lockdown, sporting challenges were set, baking challenges were set, take a picture of you reading a book in the most unusual place. Now we're a bit limited now because you can't go anywhere, but you could do it, within the house, or, coming back to what I said about the show me your best piece of work, show me the weirdest wallpaper you've got, show me your pet,
Yeah.
show me the poster in your bedroom. So there's lots that can be done just to keep kids socializing, and also to think about, we, as a mum, I've talked a lot, when she's not looking at a screen, she wants to be playing on a computer game, and so you're having to drag them away from the screen and say, well, come on, let's just go and do something else. But it's the ideal opportunity to play board games and, read magazines and watch TV.
I mean, there was Jim, who was on last night, was talking about that too, and one of his tips was get off the screen and find stuff that is in the physical world that you can bring into the lesson, whether that's go and find a picture or a book, like you're saying, actually try and find ways to make stuff that that they're probably going to be able to find in a normal house part of the lesson, and bring that in to be a focus and something else that other kids can see on the camera rather than just the faces, and just try and use things that are outside of the digital world to bring in to
and
it.
If you're brave enough, do scavenger hunts. They're fun. I've seen somebody say, okay, I want everybody to go and find something red, and suddenly all the screens go blank and all the kids run off, and the next thing they're coming back and they're all holding up anything, and keeping it very vague like that, because you don't want to, you can't say, go and find me your mobile phone, and then they all start sharing. That's not going to work. But anything with a colour, or go and find me, go and find me a dirty plate, or go and find me an empty bottle, because there's always an empty bottle in a house of something. Quite funny if you bring up a bottle of wine, but but just doing that, getting them up and moving whilst they're in a lesson, because I know a lot of PE teachers are bless them, engaging them in circuit training in their bedrooms, living rooms, wherever they are. The sound of from my upstairs is, on a Friday morning when it's PE and she's doing star jumps and running on the spot.
Even that will just send them to a link to Joe Wicks.
It's not at the right time for secondary schools.
No, thanks for that. And really great tips. Thanks so much. So let's just go back to. I'll get to your question in a minute, Nicola. Thanks for popping that in the chat box. But Penny, just before that, you had a question just as we first tuned in. It'd be great if you could ask that.
I was wondering if there was any way of practicing on Zoom without being connected to somebody.
Yeah, so there is. I mean, you can just open up a Zoom meeting. You can start a meeting yourself and not have anybody in that meeting. So you're just there on your own. You can see what your camera looks like, and I would recommend you'd always join your Zoom a few minutes before to be on your own anyway, just to set up your camera, set up everything else, and get used to remind yourself where the controls are. And then if you did want to actually use a function that requires somebody else, you can always invite someone to that session who might also want to practice. And that could be something like that comes from this. I'm not quite sure how I'll do that yet, but it could be something where actually a lot of teachers just want to have a practice amongst themselves without kids and just talk about it and just share your own knowledge and tips and tricks, and that could be a really good
doing things like the PowerPoint presentation. I mean, how do you get that? I don't even know how you get that up on the screen.
So
no, and it can be confusing first time you use it, but I'll let you jump on this.
I was going to say, so at the bottom of your screen, can you see it says share screen?
Yeah.
So you would just click on that, and then that will open everything you've got open on your computer.
Okay.
Which is why it's always important to close loads of things down before you do it. It's what I did prior to coming on here. And then you just click it and it opens up, and then that allows you, so you can see that screen as you're talking. So it's actually quite easy, because if you think that in a classroom you tend to be looking at a class and whatever's on your board behind you, you do that a lot. In this instance, you are just looking forwards. But just on that prior to, because I'm always very honest, I sat down and I opened up prior to coming on with Kim and this starting, and I was wearing a cream top. And I realised that I just totally blended in. You couldn't actually see. I couldn't decide whether I looked naked or I was just blending in. So I very quickly ran up the stairs and got changed. And that's because I went to host my own meeting just to check that I looked vaguely normal when I came on screen.
And that was one of the tips I gave the other night, actually, was where stand out. You know, make sure you're well lit and that you can actually see you and not just blending into a dark shadowed background. I'm not doing very well today because I've kind of been forced into this corner of this place that I'm in today. The only place I could use. So I'm kind of blending in. If I do this, I'll match up. But
I know some teachers who've bought ring lights because it makes them look better on the screen. But
face a window. I mean, the thing with that is with the video is it actually does when if you've got, especially if people have got you in gallery view, where if they haven't pinned, and your gallery view is when you see everybody on the call at once, especially if they haven't pinned themselves or they're not pinned. If you're a teacher or you're leading the thing and you don't stand out as much at least as everybody else, or if not you look a bit more pro, then it's a sort of unsaid, unspoken judgment that that gets judged as to like who's the authority here, who's like not authority in that sense of the word, but just as who's being paid attention to. And I think it does.
Is key. It really is, because you just disappear on the screen, and particularly some schools are making them wear uniform, so then it's more obvious because you're not in the tie. But lots of schools aren't. So it is important that you get them yourself front and centre, eyes on me, like you would in a classroom.
Can you actually move yourself?
Yeah.
How do you mean?
So you mean in terms of, well, I tend to pin. So if I went like this now, if I opened my 3 dots at the top of my screen on the right and pinned myself, I would become very large in the centre of the screen, and you all become little all around. Okay.
And it's down to the person who's viewing it. So I can change that in the top right hand corner. I can change the view to gallery, and I see everybody equally.
Yes.
Or I can go to speaker view, and that will generally pick up who's making the noise, who's speaking. Or if someone's if you're the host and you're pinning, then it will show that.
And I have found, Penny, that pinning's better, because if you put yourself in speaker view, and I'm guilty of this myself, that when people are talking, I go, and it naturally flicks. So whereas if you've pinned yourself as the host, you don't move.
Okay, yeah, I've spotted it now.
Yeah.
Cool. So hopefully that helps Penny answer your question. Thanks for your question, Nicola. Have you got any tips, please, for differentiation in the online classroom? Our breakout room's the answer to this. Nicola, do you mind just, you might be clear to you, Carol, but do you mind just quickly clarifying that question, just what you mean by differentiation in the online classroom? You can feel free to unmute yourself, Nicola, and chip in.
Yeah, hi,
thank
you. Differentiation is a challenge, I think, in a normal classroom, and I haven't had any experience yet of this in an online classroom. And it's something I'd really appreciate having some advice about.
I think there's a couple of things. There's obviously, when you're planning your lessons, you can think about the task that you're going to set and who's doing what. I tend to have always had challenge questions, etc. anyway, on slides, so that I'm going to be in a position whereby there's always that child who'll finish immediately. Doesn't matter what you've said, they'll finish immediately, and then there's something else for them to do. But I share with you that breakout rooms, I think, is, and I'm not there yet, but I think that's going to be a really useful tool moving forwards, because then you can set up separate activities, but they won't all know. And I think that will prove useful for setting different questions. I suppose it depends on your setting. In a lot of places, I'll be honest, I'm always quite direct. So if kids are getting a different question, I don't say you're getting you know, a lower ability question, but I will say, right, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing the other, and setting it up. And virtually what I've tended to have done is colour code it. So I say, right, the following people are purple, you're blue, you're green, just to make it a little bit easier. But as it always is, it's still as hard virtually in the classroom. I'm just glad I'm not primary. That's what I'm going to say. So if you're primary, I doff my hat.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yes, I am primary.
There you go.
Thanks for your question, Nicola. I'm just going to check on the questions that people have submitted, see if there's any that we haven't answered yet. There's one. How do we eliminate Gavin Williamson and Michael Gove? I'm not sure we can answer that one.
I couldn't possibly tell you my plan.
But yeah, we were steering away from politics on these chats. But I thought that was a great question anyway.
Yeah, great question. No comment.
I mean, the main questions have all really been about engagement, because I've said this in each session, and people get a bit nervous about the technology, but kind of once you get used to where the buttons are, it becomes a lot quicker, a lot easier, a lot quicker. And so, I mean, I'd say my number one tip for engagement is, it sounds really like, I guess, simplistic, but is to engage people, as in, like you said, Carol, you automatically do that anyway, where you would go, okay, you know, Penny, answer me this question, and I said that and I think that just by, rather than talking to people as a group, and one of the things I set out at the beginning of the tips that I gave on Monday was that the general feeling of, rather than trying to talk to everybody, because then you have the danger of it kind of no one listening, is what I've found is, if you make people feel like that you could be talking to them at any second, then they're much more likely to sort of, not out of fear, but just out of being their ears poking up, being like, oh, maybe I should listen to this because it might be my turn to answer next. So I think, like, the question that I was just looking at was like, how do we be more engaging online than in a normal space? So for me, it's that engaging people directly and saying those names and giving those icons, looking down the lens and going, yes, you know, that kind of thing.
Yourself. You know, I think certain. There's always been a joke that I can break any technology. The kids know it. You know, I'm the one who calls, and I send for the technician and they arrive and I've just not put the plug in or something. That's my type. All right, the screen starts to freeze or jump, and I make jokes with it. And I think the key is just, you can still only be yourself. So if it's going wrong, it's going wrong, and you have to say, oh, I can't do this. Somebody tell them what to do. And then kids want to be involved in your lessons. They want to see you, because they're not seeing anybody else. So they'll offer suggestions in the chat, or somebody will put their hand up and say, Miss, if you just press this button, everything will be okay. Great, perfect, off we go again. And I think that's it. Part of it is not forgetting who you are, because we can't all be perfect all the time with our wonderful lessons that go bang, bang, bang. You know, life isn't like that. It's not like that when we're in school and in a classroom. So it's not going to be like that when we're delivering it online. I mean, I've had some brilliant stories this week. I've got a friend whose dog threw up during one of his science lessons, you know, and she was going, sorry kids, just give me 30 seconds. And she's going, get out of here. You know, we've probably all seen a lad shared on Twitter that his daughter, in the middle of a very important demonstration, shouted, Daddy, I need a wee. Daddy, I've done the wee. So these things are going to happen, but these will be the stories that kids will tell in 20 years' time. You know, that time when we were in lockdown and my teachers were amazing because we saw them as human beings. We saw that they had families and pets and people who wandered in and out, and Amazon deliveries being delivered every 5 minutes to the door. So I think that's just worth remembering.
I definitely think that's a great point about being yourself, and that things don't go well all the time. And no matter how many times you go on Zoom, you're always going to go, can you hear me? Is this on? You know, it just happens. And I think that's you know, it's almost like I think of it as like a little pressure release valve a little bit, because one of the things that's come up in one of the questions is like, how, It depends, obviously, depends on the school and whether you're primary and different ages and stuff, but how you deal with the pressures of, like, especially if you, like yourself, if you're a parent yourself and a teacher, you've got all this stuff to do, you've got to be at home and do the stuff that's associated with being at home. It's almost like no one's got anything to do, but at the same time we're busier than ever. And so one of the questions that came up, and it's come up a few times, is like, how do we deal with this extra level of pressure and like all this workload? And I think with things like that, reminding yourself that it does go wrong, and that's okay, and that can be just fun, and that's fine. It just allows you to kind of release a little bit of that pressure release valve, and just be like, you know what, it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as we get through it and we get through it together, then that's the main thing.
And the nicest thing, I think, is that at the end of every lesson, kids say, "Thanks, miss," or they write in the chat box, "Thanks, miss," "See you, miss," "Thanks, miss." And that reminds you why you're doing it.
Yeah. Brilliant. I'm just going to ask one final question before we go. And that is really because it's the final, this is the final session that we've run. What do you think hopefully, fingers crossed, in a few weeks, couple of months time, we'll all be back to classrooms and the normal way of doing things. I'm very optimistic about that. But what do you think out of all of this will carry through? What do you think will go, hang on, actually, that was better than the way we did it before? Are there any things that you've noticed that actually we could do more of this in normal life, normal times, and that would actually help us to teach?
I think the use of apps like Loom, pre-recorded lessons, chunks, will continue and prove vital. I think kids will lose the ability to be off sick and get away with doing nothing, because there's no excuse, because they're going to have to log on, aren't they?
Interesting.
Prove that they're hanging over a toilet. They might be at home, they might be contagious, but they can still access. So I think teachers will be much more willing to, they're getting used to dual delivering. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, I'm not sure, but I think it's possible. I think the use of this sort of forum will mean as well that I don't think we'll ever go to not being in classrooms, but it assists, doesn't it? I think it would change how revision sessions could be run. All the days of people dragging themselves in the holidays to run extra revision sessions and all the things that you've already told them, or after school revision classes, well, they can just be done from the comfort of your own house. And you could say to the kids, go home or stay in school. Most schools are open till a bit later, and they can go to an area where they can plug in, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the teacher needs to be there. And I think from a teacher wellbeing point of view, I remember when it first started, the ability to be at home and put the washing machine on, but still engage in SLT meetings, teaching, was brilliant. I said, I only need 4 minutes to just throw the washing in and turn the oven on, but that makes a huge difference to your life in terms of dealing with your family. So I think a lot will come. I think people won't have as many meetings. I think lots of CPD will go online. I think people will be able to share more, because previously you had to go to meetings, or you'd drive out, and could you get cover, and could you be bothered to get there because you haven't got the time, because you've only got hour slots. Teachers live by bells, so if it can't be done within
You're not suggesting that teachers actually get a life-work balance, are you, Carol?
I am, Penny. I'm confident. I think this will really. I know we won't get 100%, but I do think it will make a difference. I do think senior leaders will start to think differently about how things are done, because you don't have to physically be in the building to host a meeting.
No, that's right.
And I think that's an important point, and that will help all of us. And I think it's, I try to look for the positives in everything. I'm that kind of person. I think my daughter she's learnt to use a laptop. She's learnt to use these apps. She didn't have a laptop before Christmas. She could probably have shown you around an Xbox, but not a laptop. So she's developed skills. She'll be better at typing. she'll be better at communicating digitally, and that's the way forward. And Nicola's just asked about parent-teacher meetings. We had my daughter's first parents' evening, and it was brilliant. 4 minutes on it was called School Cloud. I know it's had a few glitches this week, but 4-minute appointments. I'm sitting at home with my husband. The teacher pops up in front of me. Speak, ask a question. The timer ticks down. Off they go. The whole thing done and dusted in about an hour.
Oh, no more sitting there while somebody rambles on for 20 minutes.
Exactly. And it was absolutely brilliant. And I think that will allow people who can't get to parents' evenings because they work shifts or because, you know, they've got 3 other children at home, that will allow them to look at having access. So I think lots of positive things will come out of this.
I think that is a really, really brilliant way to end all of this, with the positivity and the optimism and the way that this is actually going to make a positive difference rather than us just having to deal with it, you know. So thanks so much for you guys who've contributed your questions tonight, Nicola and Penny, and thanks Carol for coming on and talking to teachers and sharing those tips and being so positive and optimistic about things as well. It's really great to hear. So that's it. Thanks. Hopefully this was helpful for you teachers out there watching. And that's it really. I just wanted to say, hopefully it was helpful. And if you found it helpful, then feel free to share this with as many other teachers as you can, and hopefully they'll get the tips and improve their lessons too. So goodbye everyone. Good luck.
Thank you.
And take care.
Bye, thank you.
See ya. Bye.